than start them 5 minutes earlier. So hello everybody, I hope you're freshen up. It's 2:30 p.m. over there. I hope that you're full of energy and attention for the next 30 minutes. I will set the space for you, but it's mainly about the leadership development model. So for the people who were in the steering team summit or the ISEC Way refreshment summit, you might know what I'm gonna be talking about, but also it's an opportunity for you to double check certain details and maybe like come up with some insights, feedback, and also very importantly, questions, because that's also why the space is here is for you to ask questions, but also to submit those questions in the link that you have. I think it has been already shared with you guys. So my proposal is to put like, to make it in a very old way and to have a notebook next to you in case you have questions, and try to take as much notes as possible so you can actually ask as many questions. Yeah, second disclaimer or expectations to be set. Whatever you're gonna see is not the new LDM, it's just like the draft. Nothing is final. It won't be like something that is very detailed in terms of the output, that how the output would look like, because that's gonna be done in IC. And in IC, there will be like the real downscale or the official launch of the new LDM in case there is new. But first of all, my name is Aziz. For the ones who don't know me, I'm part of ISK International 2021, and I usually don't put my picture in the slides because I'm here, so you can see me. I'm responsible for two main things. The first one is innovation, and the second one is customer experience. And if you combine it together, it means that I'm working on the core business of ISEC, which is leadership and the leadership development model. So one of the objectives of the space is for you to get enough context of the research, like how did it go, what was the initial scope of the project. Second is sharing with you the findings or the most important external findings that we had throughout the external research we had. And last but not least, getting a sense of how the LDM would look like. But as I told you, just a disclaimer, it's not the LDM, the final version of the new LDM that will be presented today. Sorry. Yeah, cool. So starting from the beginning, all of this and all this topic started with ISK 2025 as a midterm direction. We had this amazing element, which is empowering youth leaders in our roadmap. And one of the strategies under it is defining and measuring leadership. But this strategy is mainly like over the next 5 years. So it has like different milestones, 2021, 2022, 23, 24, 25, of course. And these milestones are basically contributing in small parts into evolving our leadership development model. So this strategy has two parts. The first one is to define the leadership that we have, to define the impact, and after that is mainly measuring it and looking at the measurement tools that we have. So that's mainly the strategy itself, and also one of the things that this strategy is actually push us forward is making sure that this LDM or the new leadership development model that we are creating is actually allowing experiential leadership development products or programs to have a stronger value proposition. So whatever will happen with the LDM, the main objective of it is to improve ELD and to make sure that ELD is or has a stronger value proposition when it comes to the leadership development that we are providing and the direct impact that ISEC is offering. Cool. So the milestone or the project of this year in 2021 is basically LDM review. So we're going to go through this project very quickly. So first of all, the initial scope of the project was mainly to explore and define the leadership development qualities, knowing that the current LDM that we had or the old LDM that we used to have is something that we all know, but also it's something that gets you like 4 leadership qualities as the main output. And one of the assumptions we had is that those LDQs are not relevant anymore in the context that we have. So we started with that assumption in the beginning, and we had this question if these qualities are still relevant and they are still real when it comes to the leadership development that we are offering to our customers or not. So that's the first assumption. The second one is the effectiveness of the leadership standards that we are delivering as members. So if these standards are really correlating or connecting to the leadership development process that we have. So that's also one of the assumptions we had, is that these standards, they might be not that effective when it comes to the development of leadership in our customers. Cool. Then the objectives also of this project, or the objective of the research, was mainly refreshing the LDQs, making sure that these LDQs are pretty aligned with the new ALD programs or the current ones. And last but not least, validating or rejecting the connection between standards and leadership development, as I mentioned. So these are like mainly understanding the context of from where did we start the research, so you can actually understand how to go later on. So first of all, what we did is that we took a sample, first from membership, second from exchange participants, and that sample, we tried to make it as much representative as possible from different regions, but also from different layers, to understand also the differences between the layers and how team members are answering and how LCPs are answering is also very different. So these insights will make a huge difference in the process of the research. So first, there's the sample for membership taken in the research. Then regarding the exchange programs, also we tried to get as much representative sample as possible, but this is not like, so this is the total like 15, 18, 37, and 30%. But for instance, like in GV, there were different proportions, there were representation from different regions. So for each program, there is somehow a representation that makes sense according to the performance of each program. Yeah. Yeah, and also you can take into account here that most of the answers that were coming from GV that were not necessarily coming from AP, since like AP was one of the first regions to not run GV anymore in the last year at least. Cool. So we checked, as I mentioned, the standards and how these standards are affecting our customers in the leadership development process, and we found out that the team standards are actually affecting the after journey, and it's validated that most of the customers are getting those standards in order to get the leadership development qualities they want, or the output of leadership that we've been promising. That's for membership. For exchange participants, actually is the same. So people are satisfied with their experience, they're getting leadership development, but also they're validating the fact that exchange standards are the ones that have been affected. So in this research, what happened is that when we asked them if they got the standards or not, and if they didn't get any standard, which standards they didn't get. So everybody who put LDQs, or the majority, we're talking about the majority here, to validate the assumption. The majority of our customers said that one of the issues that they have is the logistical standards, but not the leadership standards. So that's how or where the connection is happening, by understanding that leadership development is not necessarily connected to the logistical standards, but it's actually connected to the leadership standards. Cool. But when it comes to the external research, and what happened with the external research is that we looked at different aspects of leadership, whether with the external trends that we have right now in like post-pandemic, during the pandemic, and so on, understanding what kind of leadership trends do we have in the world, and also understanding from different practices from different organizations or competitors. But when I'm talking about competitors, it's not exchange organizations, it's leadership development organizations. That's who my competitor is in this research, and I hope that this is also the competitor that we have in general, because we're dual leadership, not exchange. And this is how the external research went. So first of all, when it comes to the leadership trends that have been shown, first of all, the lack of social interaction due to the pandemic made us not trusting leaders anymore, or not trusting leaders as much as we used to, even though they were not like that much of trustworthy, but still leaders are less and less trusted. And that's coming from the fact that we don't have social interaction anymore. And there is no way to interact that much, like as much as we used to have. And this bring in the idea that the leadership that we have doesn't have trustworthiness, and it's not creating leaders that are trusted enough in the future. Second is that at the same time we are moving from an action-centered kind of leadership to a values-based leadership, which means that the 21st century leadership needed, or the kind of leadership that is needed for the century, is a leadership that evolves or includes values, that includes a vision that the person should have, and that includes a purpose that the person should have after the experience, and so on. Second, practices. And I'm sure that you saw this ad that comes on YouTube and tell you, yeah, if you sign up for this for the next 3 hours, you will be one of the greatest leaders and you will develop leadership. And that actually exists. And that's one of the practices that we have in the world, especially on internet, is that there is this, what we call the e-learning, but that's not the best practice. And the best practice still be the ongoing teaching of the ongoing experience living, and the ongoing learning throughout experience is the most successful and effective way to develop leadership. So tools such as those are very, very important in the practice of leadership development, but mainly what we need to understand is that assisted reflection is fundamental in the leadership development process. What do I mean by that? Is that whenever you are in an experience that has a leadership development as a goal, you need to have that assisted reflection that is helping you out throughout debriefing your experience, understanding what's going on, setting personal goals, achieving those goals, tracking those goals throughout the experience. All of that is called assisted reflection in the leadership development processes. So the main idea is to keep that main thing, which is the assisted reflection, as the center of the whole process of the LDM. Last but not least, the other organizations or the competitors that we had, one of the most important trends that we found out is that leadership goes beyond competencies. Leadership goes beyond the hard skills that you learn in ISEC, or the hard skills that you learn in a GTA when you go to a company in Germany. And it's not something that we should actually, I don't know, remove, but it's not enough. So it's a part of the leadership development. It's a part of the output that we get when we go to a GV, when we go to when we join ISEC, for instance, or when we go to GTA or GTE. But one of the things that has been shown is that it's not only about the competencies and the skills or the professional hard skills that we get. Meaning that making leaders competent and trustworthy, which means that we need to develop leadership and to develop young people that would leave the ISEC experience with also a specific set of values to live by, because that's gonna be long lasting more than just competencies, because competencies or skills, you can learn them today, and in 2 or 3 years, you won't be able to repeat the same task that requires the same competencies, maybe because you forgot how to do things, or you can forget skill and you can forget the competency, but a value cannot be removed from a person. So it's very, very hard, and it's a long-lasting impact. It's not just a 1 or 2 years impact that would change your life somehow, but what we are looking at is a long-lasting impact or long-lasting leadership development. Cool. So taking into account all of these insights, whether from the qualitative research, and one of the details also that I forgot to mention in the qualitative research is that when we were asking team members, especially, and even team leaders, when we were asking them about leadership development qualities, they were answering about ISEC values. And that's very, very interesting and tricky. And that's how the whole research turned into a different direction. Because they were not mentioning ISEC values as they were, but they were doing it explicitly or implicitly, actually, by mentioning certain values, such as I lived this experience and I became more, I became someone who strives more, or strives for better, and strive like stuff that are related to one of the ISEC values, which is striving for excellence. I'm just giving you an example to get the idea of what I'm saying, but members were actually answering including ISEC values in their answers while they were talking about leadership development. So without even knowing what kind of impact those answers will have, they were mentioning ISEC values. So looking at the current LDM, what we want to change actually is not something that as big as we might think. It's just the output of leadership development and how it would look like. So it's not only one thing or four things that are leadership development qualities, but also a set of values that are supporting the person once they leave the ISEC experience with something that would last for longer duration, let's say. Cool. So values-based leadership, what is it? What is this amazing philosophy about having values in the middle of leadership, and how those values will be practiced, how those values will be gained, and so on and so forth? So there is this philosophy, which is values-based leadership, which means that people will be mostly motivated by their values, by the core that they have. And according to these beliefs, they will generate certain behaviors that are leaders' behaviors. So mainly making sure that the identity of the person out of an ISEC experience would be somehow standardized with the values that we are providing to these young people. So yeah, so ISEC values are still in the context of leadership development. And also one of the news is that the section of values in the ISEC way started to make sense right now, because values have been always in that one pager, like in a corner, just saying like ISEC values and that's it. And nobody understands what's the connection of these values with the rest of the ISEC way, and how this section functions in the way of the organization. So that's very important to put there. And at the same time, right now, what we are working on is the definitions and ways of practice of these values. So one of the things also that we saw in the research is that each program is very different from another when it comes to the leadership development process that we have. Second is that competencies and skills gained during each program. It's one of the things that we'll be looking at for the next 3 months, 2 months and 2 weeks. Oh my God, time flies. And we need to make sure that the research is done before IC. So during IC, you could expect the competencies per programs, like what kind of competencies do we have for each program once we go into that experience, plus the values, the ISEC values, and how are they embedded into each program. But one of the things also that my CDER will be working on is understanding of young people towards our ISEC values. That's first. So there will be surveys, there will be qualitative research about that. Second is making sure that these standards also make sense. So the standards also will be looked at, and I will give you a shot. And here, these are like the main blocks that we wanted to divide values. Of course, this is not the branding of LDM or whatsoever. No worries, it's gonna be way fancier, it's gonna be nice, and it's gonna be good looking for our members to get the buy-in, and also to get them in their mind once they join the organization. So no worries about it. But what we wanted to do is to divide the upcoming leadership standards that we want to have into 4 main blocks. The first one is about seeing the values, getting the examples of the values. Second is discussing the values and having those debrief conversations with ISEC members and so on. Third is assessing the values and having the tool of measurement inside of the LDM, because we never had this. It has been like LDA has been already like always out of the process itself, and it was never used in a way. I mean, theoretically speaking, it was used and it was nice and so on. But what we want to do is that like no experience would function without an LDA assessment that is taken forward by the customer over the whole experience. So assessment and measuring the values throughout your own experience is very important. So LDA will be based on that. And at the same time, we are working with our external consultant in Quebec, here in Montreal, with a company that is called Bigger Data that is working on these tools of measurement and so on. So we started drafting the first LDA, taking into account like the ISEC values and so on, but we still also looking at ISEC values overall, like the description of the values, are they making sense right now for the leadership development model and so on. So these are also questions that are being asked and answered throughout the upcoming research. And last but not least, a support system that would support the customer throughout their journey. Yeah, great. We have 10 minutes for questions, live questions, and also feedback or insights. And no worries about questions, like in case I cannot answer your question right now, I will try as much as I can to answer it in the sheet. But at the same time, if I cannot answer the question, keep in mind that I'm taking it forward as an insight. If I cannot answer one of your questions, guys, I will take it as an insight or an input for the upcoming research. So yeah, whoever wants to ask a question, you can actually put your initials and yeah, you can move on. Yes, so the LDA will be based on ISEC values, not on LDQ. So thank you, Banuka, for your question. So here's my assumption. Because we still also didn't finish the research, but here's my assumption. So first of all, we are working on the tool of measurement in a way to understand the values of a human being before they go into an ISEC experience, during the ISEC experience, like in the midway, because that was also one of the recommendations we've got from Bigger Data, which is our external consultant. Sorry, guys. And at the same time, having the assessment of values by the end of the experience. So the LDA would be a kind of checkpoint understanding from the customer. That's first. Second, yes, it's going to be based on the values, because according to the new philosophy that we want to have inside of the LDM is values is the main thing. So ISEC values, or the human values that will be spread around during the experience, is the main leadership, the kind of leadership that we want to develop. So the skills and competencies would go on the second place, which could be in 2022 being considered as the indirect impact that ISEC is doing, or that the indirect impact that ISEC is providing, because in this way we are providing values, or we are giving values to these young people, and that's the first primary impact that we are delivering, leadership. Plus competencies and skills that could be considered as a way to improve employability in Sri Lanka, for instance, and that's something that is indirect. That's not the primary objective of ISEC in Sri Lanka, but at the same time, it can actually affect the employability of Sri Lanka as a whole country by making sure that people who go to GTE are better in terms of competencies when they go back to their home country. So that's something that could be explored in the upcoming years. For sure, it won't be done for this year, but I'm trying as much as possible to fasten with the LDA, because I think after the launch, the LDA should come as fast as possible so people can start using it for the standards. Thank you, sir. Cool. Another question? Yes, Prayag.
So I want to know, is there a conversation around checking, reviewing the values currently we have, or changing the definitions, or what does it mean exactly?
All right. So what happened in the ISEC Way Refreshment Summit is that we had several calls with multiple stakeholders, and especially you guys, MCPs, and also different layers, to ask them also about the specific description of each value. And we still didn't go through it because that's going to be part of the research, but it was somehow like put into a corner when we were refreshing the whole ISEC Way. And right now we will go through the answers of the network also to understand if these values still make sense till now. That's first. Second is, for instance, like you cannot come and tell that Prayag will have that value of activated leadership, because Prayag is already an ISECer. So that's part of our identity too. That's our business. This is what we do every day. Like we are trying to activate leadership. So maybe it's something that should not be as explicit as like that, and we should maybe refresh it. So these are like the options that we could be exploring. But yeah, ISEC values, which is something that didn't change, at least like since I joined the organization. So that's also something that it's very delicate. So we are gonna go through it in a very delicate way. Yeah. It's very fragile, like it's our values. Yeah. Thank you, Prayag, for the question. All right, the LDA will be applicable to PIA as well. Yes, what do you mean by that? Like, yeah, every member would be taking the LDA in this case.
Because
yes.
yeah, because sometimes I feel that it's very fresh to a member newbie who just joined ISEC to do LDA, and then maybe when they finish their 1 term or 2 terms, they will still taking it. But when I, being LCP or even more higher position, I don't think it's the most applicable model for us to measure the leadership model, at least the old version. So that's why I asked this question.
Got you. Yeah, actually, we have a lot of issues with the current LDA as it is right now, whether with the number of questions, whether with the questions, how they are worded, like themselves. So it's a bit tricky actually, because when you draft these things, you need to test them first. So like that's why I was telling you also since the beginning that LDA might take longer than the LDM, and that's for sure, because the LDA should be tested at a certain point of time, so we can understand if it makes sense to have it or not, if that's the right thing that we are doing, like measuring values, and also is it as easy as measuring competencies and so on? I don't think so. So yeah, the LDA will be different, that's for sure. And that's one of the things that we'll be working on with our external consultant. And that's why I was saying that it's very delicate. And that's why like we want to involve the external perspective in these kind of tools building as much as possible. So the room for mistake is a bit lower than we used to have. But yeah, I mean, there is always room for mistake, and that's why like maybe the adoption of LDA is not as common as it is everywhere. Welcome, Arfan. Yes.
Yeah, Aziz, I'd like to know like what would be the timeline that you're expecting for the LDM to take in effect, and also the LDA, and as in how would it be reflected in our platforms, like that change?
Oh my God, man, that's a lot of questions in one question, but I like it. Cool. So when it comes to the timeline first, we have this research about values, about the description of the values, about the standards themselves, and about the practices of ISEC values and so on. So that's going to be taken from now till pre-meeting of IC, let's say, which is by the end of July. Because why I'm saying pre-meeting of IC, because in legislation fair, you might have this presentation about the LDM. Not you might, like that's my job. It's gonna happen. So you will have the presentation of the LDM 2.0, and we will have this conversation in the legislation fair. But what's also part of the timeline is the LDA itself and drafting the LDA. So in my opinion, it will take a bit longer. And what do I mean by longer is like 3 months of testing at least, getting customer insights, because also we don't have a lot of exchange participants right now. So that's a little bit tricky, but we want to start trying by members because that's the most solid program that we have. So we can actually embed them. Yeah, one of the things also that they mentioned in the timeline is the competencies themselves. Like the research about the competencies is already a big thing. So it's going to be done with the product heads, which means Koni, Ni, and Khadia, to understand also like their perspective regarding the skills, the competencies that each program could develop, and embedding those in the value proposition. Because as I mentioned it, it's here. It says, yeah, allowing our ELD programs to have strong value proposition centered around leadership. So the part of the competencies is this part of being achieved in the strategy. So that's what's gonna happen. But the LD will take much longer. But for IC, yeah, hopefully you will get the final version of the LDM, and you will be able to understand how the research went over the past 2 months. Cool. Maybe I think it would be more competitive when people can use the final LDA result when they finish the role to the companies and like-minded organizations, which means GV, and be more welcome than other competitors. Like P&G would test similar stuff online to understand your value and overall personalities. Cool. Yeah. And actually, what we are doing right now is we are building a survey also with our partner, which is called Qualtrics. So Qualtrics is a platform that asks too many people, like random target, not random, but a sample target that has been created, to ask them several questions regarding ISIC values and also leadership perception. How do they see leadership being delivered by ISIC, and how do they see the logo, the color of the logo, and so on. So that's Mari's project, which is the brand project, plus the LDM project with the same survey. So the questions are a bit different, but it includes all of this, and that's what one of the CEDAR will be working on. Cool, amazing. Right, more questions. We still have 2 more minutes, guys. Otherwise, there is this link that I'm sure that you guys have. Otherwise, let me know for questions. Yeah, link for questions. Do you guys have it? Cool, great. Yeah, we're almost done. Thank you so much, guys, for your time. I hope you got as much information as needed. No worries, if you still have questions, just put them in the link. And in case you still have like big concerns or big questions, do not hesitate. Also in that sheet of questions, in that form of questions, you can actually ask a rhetorical question that I would get it as an insight. No worries, I would take it in a very friendly way. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cici, for making this happen. And yeah, enjoy your conference. See you.
Thank you so much, Aziz, for
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, AP.